Number 1. The Bermuda Triangle. Between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, there is a stretch of ocean with no formal boundaries, no official designation in any maritime chart, and no government-recognized status as a danger zone. And yet, over the past century, dozens of ships and aircraft have disappeared there under conditions that were never fully explained. Some were found, most were not. The area covers roughly 500,000 square miles of Atlantic Ocean. Thousands of flights cross it every year without incident. But for certain vessels, at certain moments, the ocean simply seemed to stop giving answers. This is the story of what we know and what we don't. The term Bermuda Triangle was first used in print in 1964 in an article by writer Vincent Gaddis in Argosy magazine. But reports of strange disappearances in the region go back much further. The area sits in one of the most heavily traveled corridors in the world. Commercial shipping routes connecting the eastern United States to the Caribbean and South America pass directly through it. So does a significant volume of private and military air traffic. The U.S. Coast Guard does not officially recognize the Bermuda Triangle as a hazardous zone. The Lloyd's of London insurance market does not charge higher premiums for vessels traveling through it. The World Wildlife Fund, which has compiled data on the most dangerous bodies of water on Earth, does not list it among them. These are facts. What is also a fact, the most famous disappearance in the region, the one that arguably launched the Bermuda Triangle into cultural mythology, occurred in December 1945. It was called Flight 19. 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida, on a routine training mission. On board, 14 men. The weather initially was described as favorable. They never returned.
The search aircraft sent to find them, a PBM Mariner with 13 men aboard, also disappeared that night. In total, 27 people vanished in a matter of hours. No wreckage was ever conclusively recovered. The Navy's official investigation concluded the cause was unknown. Let's look at what the record actually shows. Transcripts from Flight 19's radio communications reveal something unusual. The lead pilot, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, reported that his compasses were malfunctioning. He believed the squadron was flying over the Florida Keys, a navigational error, if confirmed, that would have placed them heading out over open ocean rather than back toward land. At one point, Taylor reportedly said, "Everything looks strange, even the ocean." At another, he reportedly told his crew not to follow him if they thought he was heading toward the Atlantic. Then the signal faded. What makes this case difficult to close is not just the disappearance itself, it's the pattern around it. The search plane that was lost the same night, a PBM Mariner, was observed by a crew aboard a merchant vessel to explode in mid-air. That detail appears in reports from the time, though the cause of the explosion was never established. The Mariner was known to have fuel leak issues. It was sometimes referred to informally by crews as a flying gas tank. But there was no distress call before the explosion, and the wreckage was never found. Separately, in 1948, a British South American Airways aircraft called the Star Tiger disappeared on a flight from the Azores to Bermuda. The official inquiry concluded, "What happened to Star Tiger must remain an unsolved mystery." 1 year later, almost to the month, another aircraft, Star Ariel, disappeared on a flight from Bermuda to Jamaica. Both aircraft were of the same type. Both were in the region. Neither was found. Over decades, a number of explanations have circulated, some scientific, some not.
One theory involves magnetic anomalies. Some researchers have suggested that the Bermuda Triangle is one of only 2 places on Earth where true north and magnetic north align, potentially causing compass errors. Navigation instruments, particularly older ones, could, in theory, be affected. There is no confirmed scientific consensus that this phenomenon is uniquely hazardous in this region, but it has been discussed. Another theory focuses on methane hydrates, large deposits of methane gas frozen into the seafloor. Some scientists have proposed that if these deposits were released suddenly, they could create localized zones of decreased water density, areas where a ship might lose buoyancy and sink rapidly. Laboratory simulations have demonstrated the effect in controlled environments. Whether this has ever caused an actual shipwreck remains unconfirmed. Then there is the theory of rogue waves, unusually large, sudden waves that can appear without warning in otherwise calm seas. Modern satellite data has confirmed that rogue waves do exist and can reach extreme heights. Whether they explain any specific disappearance in the triangle has not been established. Some people believe the region conceals underwater technology, either ancient, such as remnants of Atlantis, or extraterrestrial. These claims are sometimes associated with underwater rock formations discovered near the Bahamas in the 1960s, known as the Bimini Road. Geologists who have studied these formations generally conclude they are natural limestone formations. Others are not satisfied with that conclusion. The most widely cited mainstream explanation comes from researchers like Lloyd's Registry and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. The disappearance rate in the Bermuda Triangle is not statistically higher than in any other heavily trafficked body of water.
A 2013 analysis by the Worldwide Fund for Nature identified the most dangerous shipping routes on Earth based on recorded losses. The Bermuda Triangle did not appear in the top 10. Some researchers point to the simple geography of the region. The ocean floor in parts of the triangle drops into one of the deepest trenches on Earth, the Puerto Rico Trench, which reaches over 28,000 feet in depth. If a ship or aircraft went down there, it might never be found. Not because of any anomaly, but because of basic physics. Others note that the region experiences unpredictable weather, including sudden, violent storms that can develop quickly and leave no time for distress signals. Gulf Stream currents can carry debris far from the original site of a sinking. These are not exotic explanations. They are mundane ones. But they do not always align neatly with every reported case. There is a reason the Bermuda Triangle has persisted in public imagination for over 6 decades. Part of it is the sheer concentration of incidents within a bounded geographic area, even if statisticians argue the concentration is not unusual. The human mind responds to clusters differently than to isolated events. Part of it is historical. The Cold War era, during which many of these stories gained mass circulation, was a period of deep institutional distrust. Governments were known to classify information about military exercises, test flights, and failed missions. When official explanations were missing or contradictory, unofficial explanations filled the gap. And part of it may be something more fundamental. The ocean has always represented the boundary of the known world. For most of human history, what lay beyond the horizon was genuinely unknown. The Bermuda Triangle may be less about the ocean itself and more about what human beings do when confronted with irreducible uncertainty. When the official record says cause unknown, something in the human mind refuses to leave it there.
The Navy's investigation into Flight 19 remains classified to varying degrees, even today. Certain records have been released, others have not. Wreckage consistent with TBM Avenger aircraft has been found in the waters off Florida over the years, but none has been conclusively identified as belonging to the lost squadron. 27 men went into the air on December 5, 1945. None came back, and the ocean kept what it knows. So what really happened in the Bermuda Triangle? There are reasonable explanations for many of the disappearances.
Weather, human error, equipment failure, the simple depth of the sea. But many is not all. And for some cases, the official record still ends with the same word it always has: unknown. The answer depends on what you choose to believe and what you're willing to leave unresolved. Number 2. The Dyatlov Pass Incident. On the night of February 1st or 2nd, 1959, the exact time is unknown, 9 experienced hikers died in the Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. They were found over the course of several weeks. Some were close to their tents, others were more than a kilometer away. Some had serious internal injuries, others showed no obvious cause of death. Their tent had been cut open from the inside. No one who died that night left a record of what they saw. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old student at the Ural Polytechnical Institute. The team consisted of 10 people, 9 students and 1 instructor, all experienced in winter mountaineering. One member turned back early due to illness and survived. Their destination was O'Torton Mountain, a challenging but not extraordinary route for experienced hikers. They planned to return by February 12th. When no word came by February 20th, a search and rescue operation was launched. The first bodies were found on February 26th.
4 more were discovered in May after the snow melted, in a ravine about 75 meters from a makeshift shelter they appeared to have been constructing. The tent was found on the slope of a mountain called Kholat Syakhl, a name that, in the local Mansi language, translates roughly to Dead Mountain. The tent had been set up correctly. Inside were the hikers' belongings, shoes, food supplies, and equipment. Everything was in order, and the tent had been cut open from the inside, as if the occupants had needed to exit very quickly and could not use the entrance. The details that emerged from the autopsies and the search created a picture that investigators struggled to explain coherently. 2 of the hikers, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonoshenko, were found near the remains of a fire, wearing only underwear, in temperatures of approximately -25 to 30 degrees Celsius. 3 others, Dyatlov himself, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin, were found in positions that suggested they had been trying to return to the tent. They were found at different distances, as if they had fallen separately. All 5 died of hypothermia. The 4 found in the ravine in May presented a different picture entirely. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotarev had significant chest injuries, broken ribs, crushed sternums, described by the examining doctor as similar to the injuries caused by a car crash. The force required to cause such damage without breaking the skin was, the pathologist noted, significant. Dubinina's tongue, eyes, and parts of her facial tissue were missing. This detail has been attributed by some investigators to decomposition and scavenging. Others remain uncertain. Zolotarev's eyes were also missing. A toxicological report on some of the clothing indicated the presence of radioactive contamination, a detail that was noted in the original Soviet investigation and later confirmed. The source of the contamination has never been conclusively established.
One investigator at the time described the force that caused the chest injuries as comparable to a car crash or the pressure wave from an explosion. The Soviet investigation officially closed the case in May 1959, citing an unknown compelling force. Decades later, the case remains open in Russia. It was officially reopened in 2019 by Russian authorities, who concluded in 2020 that the most likely cause was an avalanche. Specifically, a slab avalanche, a type that can travel with significant force even on relatively gradual slopes. Many researchers accept this explanation. Others do not. The original investigators noted that the slope gradient near the tent was not typically associated with avalanche risk. There was no evidence of avalanche debris at the scene when the tent was first found. And the hikers, experienced mountaineers who had camped on that slope deliberately, apparently chose to flee the tent rather than shelter inside it or nearby. An alternative theory that has gained support involves infrasound. Low-frequency sound waves produced by certain wind patterns interacting with mountain terrain. Some researchers have proposed that the group may have experienced intense psychological distress caused by infrasound exposure, potentially triggering panic behavior. Infrasound at certain frequencies is known to cause feelings of unease, fear, and in extreme cases, perceptual disturbances. This would not explain the physical injuries. Some people believe the group encountered a Soviet military test, a weapon, a missile, or some classified technology operating in the region that night. Soviet military activity in the Urals during this period was significant and largely classified. The radioactive contamination found on the clothing has been cited in connection with this theory, though its source has not been confirmed. There are theories involving the indigenous Mansi people of the region, who were known to consider the mountain sacred.
No evidence of any third-party involvement was ever found. And there are theories on the outer edges that involve phenomena that have no conventional explanation at all. The 2020 Russian prosecutor's investigation concluded that a slab avalanche, combined with poor visibility and disorientation, most likely caused the deaths. Under this model, the hikers cut the tent to escape a sudden snow collapse, fled in a state of panic and confusion, and died of hypothermia before they could return. The chest injuries, under this explanation, were caused by the avalanche itself, snow compacting against the chest with sufficient force. Independent researchers, including a team from Ural Federal University, have conducted computer simulations supporting the avalanche hypothesis, demonstrating that even a small slab could generate the injuries described. Skeptics note that these simulations depend on assumptions that cannot be verified from the original evidence, which is incomplete. Several autopsies were conducted under Soviet conditions that limited independent review. Some original documents from the investigation remain classified or have been lost. The Dyatlov case has endured for more than 60 years, not simply because it is unexplained, but because it is almost explained, and the gap between almost and fully contains details that resist easy closure. The combination of factors, the cut tent, the varying states of undress, the catastrophic internal injuries with no external marks, the radioactive traces, the missing facial tissue, creates a pattern that no single explanation has addressed comprehensively. And the Soviet government's decision to close the investigation quickly in 1959, at the height of the Cold War, without releasing full documentation, ensured that suspicion would outlast the original investigation by generations. 9 people went into the mountains, none came back.
The tent was cut from the inside, and the official record, for decades, offered nothing more specific than an unknown compelling force. Whether that force was snow, sound, pressure waves from something unnamed in the sky, or something else entirely, the record does not say. What really happened at Dyatlov Pass? The most recent official answer is an avalanche, but the tent was still cut from the inside, and some of the documents are still not public. The answer depends on how much you trust official investigations and how much you believe in the ability of snow alone to leave some questions permanently open. Number 3, the Cooper case. On November 24th, 1971, the night before Thanksgiving, a man bought a one-way ticket for a short flight from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. He gave his name as Dan Cooper. By the time the plane landed, he had hijacked it, extorted $200,000 in ransom from the airline, parachuted from the aircraft somewhere over the forest of the Pacific Northwest, and disappeared. He has never been found. He has never been identified. And the FBI officially suspended active investigation of the case in 2016. The only unsolved case of air piracy in American commercial aviation history. Northwest Orient Flight 305 departed Portland on the afternoon of November 24th. On board were 36 passengers and 6 crew members. The man who called himself Dan Cooper was seated in the rear. Shortly after takeoff, he passed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She assumed it was a phone number. He told her she should read it. The note stated that he had a bomb. Cooper showed her what appeared to be a bomb in his briefcase. Wires, cylinders, red sticks. He demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. The airline complied. The ransom, $200,000 in $20 bills, the serial numbers recorded, was delivered to the aircraft when it landed in Seattle. Passengers were allowed to deplane. The crew was largely kept on board.
Cooper then directed the pilots to fly toward Mexico City at low altitude and low speed, conditions that, as investigators later noted, were consistent with a planned parachute jump. Somewhere over southwestern Washington state, between Seattle and Reno, where the plane made a refueling stop, Cooper lowered the rear air stairs of the Boeing 727 and jumped. The exact location has never been confirmed. The investigation that followed was one of the largest in FBI history at the time. Investigators reviewed thousands of suspects over the course of decades. None matched conclusively. Cooper had left behind his clip-on tie and tie clip. DNA analysis of the tie, conducted decades later, identified a rare titanium-based compound in the fibers, a material associated with certain aerospace manufacturing processes of the early 1970s. This suggested to some investigators that Cooper may have worked in a specialized industrial or aerospace field. He had also shown specific knowledge of the Boeing 727's rear air stair mechanism, a detail not widely known to the general public. He reportedly asked an informed question about the aircraft's landing gear configuration. He knew that the 727 could fly slowly and at low altitude. In 1980, a young boy found a small bundle of deteriorating $20 bills on the bank of the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington. The serial numbers matched the Cooper ransom money. The bills were found approximately 15 kilometers from any of the mapped flight paths. This has never been explained. No other ransom money has ever surfaced. No parachute has been found. No body has been recovered. Hundreds of suspects have been proposed over the years. Former military men, skydivers, engineers, criminals. Some have been named publicly by family members or investigators. None has been confirmed.
One frequently discussed candidate was a man named Richard McCoy, who conducted a nearly identical aircraft hijacking just 4 months after the Cooper case and was eventually captured. Investigators who examined the cases in parallel noted significant similarities. McCoy was killed in a prison escape in 1974. The FBI has stated that evidence ruled him out as Cooper, but not all researchers accept this conclusion. Some investigators believe Cooper did not survive the jump. A parachute exit at night over dense forested terrain in autumn conditions without specialized gear, these are not favorable conditions, even for an experienced jumper. Several survival experts have assessed the jump as extremely difficult without military-grade equipment. Others believe he survived, lived under a different identity, and may have died years later without ever disclosing what he had done. There is a theory, cited in some reporting, that a portion of the cash turned up in the riverbed because Cooper landed in the river, either alive or dead, and the bills eventually separated from the pack and were carried downstream by current and sediment. This would place the landing site upstream from where the money was found. It has not been confirmed. The FBI's position, at the point they suspended active investigation, was that Cooper likely did not survive the jump. The conditions, darkness, rough terrain, the configuration of the parachute he apparently selected, which may have been a non-steerable training chute rather than a maneuverable sport chute, made a successful landing difficult. This explanation accounts for why no one ever spent the money. It does not fully account for why no remains, no gear, and so little of the cash was ever found in the wilderness that would have been his most likely landing zone. The Columbia River money find in 1980 remains the only confirmed physical trace of D.B. Cooper after the jump.
The Cooper case has attracted sustained public interest for over 50 years, partly because it represents something unusual, a crime that was committed successfully, witnessed by multiple people, partially documented on tape, and yet never solved. It is not an ancient mystery. It occurred within living memory. The plane, the crew, the passengers, the FBI agents who worked the case, many of them gave detailed accounts. And still, no answer. In a culture that tends to assume that any crime of sufficient scale will eventually produce a resolution, an arrest, a confession, a deathbed revelation, the Cooper case is a quiet refusal to comply with that assumption. The hijacker may have died in the trees, or he may have walked away. 50 years later, no one knows which. The FBI has over 1,000 suspects in their files. The money found in 1980 is the only physical lead that was ever confirmed. The DNA profile from the tie has never matched anyone in the database. So who was Dan Cooper? Where did he land? And wherever that place is he still there? The answer depends on what the forest kept and what it chose to give back.